is as including the capture story, right? But it also includes the sort of Krippner story, the sort of favorable view of consumer debt products, mortgage debt products, and so forth. So we think that's an important part of the picture. Likewise, there's been a story told by another person, really comical to imagine as an angel, Charles Murray. You can sort of see that here. Basically, as incomes kind of shift up or concentrate toward the top, there's a kind of a feedback effect that often kicks in there, and I think Tim tells that story quite well in his book too, that once a process like that gets underway, right, it becomes sort of self-reinforcing, worsening. Elites marry each other. Elites are sort of healthier and live longer, and they, sort of education policy increasingly tends to favor the elite and so forth. So that's another piece of the fuller story, but we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on this. We wanted to focus then on this middle bit. So as you get concentration developing, you get increased investment demand at the top. You get increased credit demand off of the top, not exactly the bottom, but really just the non-top. These two things together feed into rising leverage economy-wide, which is a classic recipe for financial fragility. And now we're back into Keynes-Heletsky territory. That, of course, fuels asset price rises. But then those asset price rises feed back into the investment demand and credit demand, right? Because, of course, this is the classic problem, right? You've invested in an asset, you borrow in order to invest in it. Basically, assets are rising more rapidly than our credit borrowing charges for a while. So there's a growing spread. So you want to borrow yet more, take on yet more leverage, as the banks do. And as Simon, I think, very wonderfully sort of articulated this morning. So basically, you want to purchase more of the assets as the prices are rising, and you get that classic sort of feedback fed bubble phenomenon or dynamic underway. And in Commonwealth, concentration sort of feed into that. We think it would constitute a significant causal factor in that development. So that's our basic focus. Okay. Now, just a couple of more points then to make, and then I'm going to show you some more graphs, and I'm going to hand it over largely to Daniel. So the question is there some way that we can corroborate the presence of this mechanism itself, right? Not just establish a correlation between income and wealth concentration on the one hand and market fragility on the other, but can we corroborate the actual presence and operation of the particular components of the mechanism? Well, that's what we're trying to do, and it's obviously a big project, and we've only Carpenter song. We've only just begun. We've just begun doing this, and what we're going to do is, in the 5 minutes I suppose that we have left, sort of report on some of our preliminary findings. One challenge, though, I have to point out really quickly before proceeding that we face in doing that is the fact that there are multiple causes, doubtless, of financial volatility and of market fragility, right? So it's kind of hard to parse out the distinct causes to find out how significant our particular mechanism is. And so sort of a corollary to that point is that it's not as though you can't conclude from what we're finding, even if it turns out that we're right, even if we find everything that we believe is at work here, even if we find that it's all indeed present, if we can corroborate its presence and operation, it still doesn't mean either of two things. It doesn't mean that you can't have financial volatility